Hello and welcome to the second part of the video Sewing an Apron Dress. Last time we stopped on a moment where we connected our ruffles, straps and front side bodice parts. If you haven't yet seen the first video, please click on the link that I've left for you in the description box. And we'll start this video with deciding how far we want our straps to overlap in the center of the front. I highly recommend checking different types of overlapping on your mock-up. Here I mark the center of the strap's width. My straps are overlapping in their centers, so they just lay on one another completely. I lay the central bodice part's central marking on that of the first strap with the right sides inside. Then lay the second strap under them, right side of the lower strap to the wrong side of the upper strap, so that all the three central marks coincide. And then pin the rest of the central bodice element to the front side bodice parts, not forgetting to distribute our gathers evenly using the markings. I also decided to hand stitch the central element, so it won't be ruined and everything is steadier there. Then an interesting part goes. I stitch only from the edge to the center and from the center to the edge, not touching the strap plus central bodice part pie. After that, I take the lining part and pin its right side to the pie, starting with the central marking and going to the edges. So we have 4 layers now: the central bodice part, 2 parts with straps, and the central bodice part's lining. It is now the time for making folds at the lining parts of the front side bodice parts. And again, stitch from the center to the edge and backwards, excluding the very central centimeters of the pie. What is the point of this, you'll ask? We do so to have an opportunity to play a little bit on placing the strap's ends to find that right position of them when everything is neat and doesn't wrinkle. And also to have the right and lining elements independent from each other. It'll help us later when we connect them to the back piece. When we are happy with how the central element looks, we stitch the pieces together. Don't forget to press all the seams flat and then press the seam allowances to the central bodice part. When pressing near the gathers, I use a special pad that is usually used for making bras, but I find it very useful for other curved places. Then I decided to trim the seam allowance of the lining piece a little bit to reduce the bulk. And now the time has come for the back piece. At first, I made some holes in the paper pattern to transfer the parallel lines to my fabric, but it was too time-consuming to skis these holes out, so I decided to use a good old ruler and draw the lines by myself. But it also seemed too time-consuming, so I made a 1.5 cm cardboard assistant. When done with drawing, all we must do is stitch in all these parallel lines. What could be easier? But there emerged yet another problem. My machine seemed to dislike stitching upon the chalk and skipped some stitches. I tried different type of needles, but the only thing that helped was stitching some millimeters under or upper the chalk lines. It's just in case you guys have these problems too. Then I measure the length of each elastic and cut. For the upper tunnel I used two 1 cm wide elastics, zigzagged together, 2 cm wide in total, and for the rest tunnels 7 mm wide. Then we should run our elastics through the tunnels. I used a bodkin for it as I haven't got a safety pin at hand. I also hand-stitched the elastic to the fabric at the openings so that it stays put. After this dull work, I decided to start assembling the skirt. To make a gather at the waistline, we should stitch two parallel lines, 7 and 15 mm from the upper edge of the front and back skirt parts with the longest stitch stroke. Then I pin the right sides of the pocket parts to the right side of the skirt, using the markings, and stitch them together with a 7 mm stitch stroke, so these seams won't be seen later. I also hem the seam allowances with an overlock. As usual, don't forget to press the seams flat at first and then iron the seam allowances out to the pocket. After that, top stitch by 1 mm of the edge, thus attaching the seam allowance to the pocket. Do so only for the front skirt part pocket pieces. Now I pin the front and back skirt parts together. I also highly recommend pinning the pocket openings together. This will prevent shifting of the layers. Then I hem the pocket edges together with an overlock and stitch with 1 cm seam allowance. First from the waistline to the pocket marking, then on the pocket and under the pocket. I double stitch at the pocket openings to strengthen these places. This is how the seam should look like. Our next steps are hemming the side seam allowances under the pocket and pressing. As usual, I press the seams flat and then turn the seam allowances to the front skirt and press. Do the same steps for the other side. Let's make the skirt ruffle. I connect two parts at their short sides with a 7mm seam allowance, hem and press. Then also hem both upper and lower edges of the just made tube and the bottom edge of the skirt. I find it easier to make a cardboard template of a needed width than using a ruler when I want to draw a line some centimeters from the edge. So here I made one that was 4 centimeters. It works as follows. If I want to have a 2 centimeters wide fold, I draw a line 2 multiplied by 2 equals 4 centimeters from the edge. So it would be easier to fold the fabric to this line and press it. It is important at this stage to fold the fabric at the upper side of the tube, so our fabric motif isn't upside down. After pressing, I made 2 parallel stitches, 15 and 10 mm from the edge, to make a gather. I used the longest stitch stroke available on my machine, 4 mm. Don't forget to mark the centers of the front and back skirt and ruffle pieces. Then measure the bottom length of one of the skirt parts as they are identical and make a gather at the upper edge of the tube piece. When you are happy with the ruffle, pin the pieces together connecting the skirt bottom edge and the ruffle's overlock hem as it is shown in the video. Don't forget to remove our 2 temporary parallel lines of stitches. Okay, now that we have hopefully had some rest while making the skirt, let's come back to our back element. When I'm done with inserting tons of elastics to the tunnels, I double check the piece with the pattern. As you can see, it is okay width way, but not okay in height, 5-6 mm higher than the pattern piece. But nonetheless, it fits perfectly with the front bodice element. The problem is that I must make at least 2 more tunnels so that everything works fine together. And as far as you have your elastics all already inserted into the made tunnels, It's not easy to stitch yet another parallel line, but I've succeeded. Now we insert the back piece between two right sides of the front bodice part. I stitched with a seam allowance of 1 cm. Now you can see how I'm making a too fast decision of trimming the seam allowances. As later, when I tried the thing on, I understood that it was not very easy for me to get into the dress as it was well fitted, but the elastics didn't stretch easily enough. So I decided to rip one side open again and sew on an invisible zipper. But it would be later, and me in the video didn't have a clue on what would happen half an hour later. Not yet. So don't make my mistakes and don't trim the seam allowances before trying the thing on, and sure everything is okay. When done with stitching, press. Okay, for those who are like me and despite my warnings, you trimmed the seam allowances. Stitch the elastics to the fabric before undoing the seam. I also decided to hem the edge to be sure everything stays on its place. Then pinned and hand-stitched one side of the zipper, another one, stitched it on, double-checked that everything was okay when opening and closing the zipper and that the upper edges are of one level. Then I put the front and the lining parts of the bodice together, right sides inside, and stitched very close to the zipper, tucking the zipper's upper tail into the seam. As at the other side of the zipper I had one thick layer of the back piece, I just stitched the zipper to it by hand. This whole zipper decision was unplanned, but it showed itself later as a good one. It worked for me at least. Okay, let's continue assembling the dress. As we did with the previous gathers, I measured the bodice front and back edges and made two gathers at the upper skirt edge. I didn't make a gather on the pocket's upper edge, they were just put on the gather untouched. Then pinned and stitched these two large pieces together, connecting the central marks, hem the edges and press the seam flat. After that, I bend the seam allowances towards the bodice, except the zipper area, and press again. Then I decided that I don't like the width of the bodice ruffles at the front. I wanted them to start from 5.5 centimeters and gradually get to 13.5, instead of being 13.5 centimeters all the way to the back. So I ripped open the waist seam a little bit again and cut and hemmed the ruffle edge to fit my desire. If you are interested in any other details about it, let me know in the comments, I'll show you my calculations. It is up to you to decide the value of the bottom hem. I bent the fabric only by 1 centimeter, as I like the length of the dress and didn't want it to be shorter. The other finishing touch that I decided to make was connecting the two straps together at the front. I made rough hand stitching at first, tried the dress on and then used an invisible stitch also made by hand, removing the first one. I also made a special cover for the zipper's tail at the waistline in order not to tear the skin by it. I cut out a small rectangle, pressed its raw edges under, folded the thin in half, enclosed the zipper in and hand stitched all around. Then the time has finally come for the buttonholes. I made one on each strap as didn't need more of them. For the buttons I bought lovely pink pigeons. And that's it! Our beautiful apron dress is done! Hope you enjoyed sewing with me and thank you very much for watching, subscribing and leaving your lovely comments. See you in the next video! Bye!